Welcome. It's time now. It's the NFL playoffs, and we're going to break down our predictions for how these playoffs are going to go. We're going to go game by game, starting in the first round and going all the way through, deciding what teams we think are going to make and eventually win the Super Bowl. Now, because we do a lot of fantasy on this channel, we couldn't resist. At the end of this video, we're going to put out our fantasy lineup. So for those of you guys who don't know, we run a fantasy playoff challenge, and essentially what that is you turn in a lineup and you run it through the entire playoffs. If you want information on that, check out our fantasy playoff challenge video on our YouTube channel. Now, much of this video is going to just entirely directly consist with nothing but football, but that will be saved for the end for you guys who have stuck around on our channel because of the fantasy. So we wanted to have a little bit there as far as the fantasy perspective goes. And of course, we'll talk about how you can turn in a lineup on our free contest and maybe even win some free prizes. But yeah, I can't wait. Let's just get right into it. I've been dying to talk some football.
All right. So let's start with the Texans versus the Colts there. I'll start with the different intangibles. We broke this down in categories, strengths, weaknesses. There's so much we wanted to get into, but for the sake of time, we really had to trim this down. But here's some basics. So I'll start with the coach. Where do I lean in this one? Who has the advantage? I look at Frank Reich. He's a rookie coach. He's done an amazing job, but he's still a rookie head coach, and so that's a concern, obviously, versus Bill O'Brien, who right now he's 1-2 in postseason play. He's not what I would call a creative coach, but I think he's solid in his coaching. So you got the rookie versus the veteran coach. Now, typically for me, I would say, well, obviously you're going to go with the veteran coach who's been in the postseason before. That would give him a slight edge. I'm not a huge fan of Bill O'Brien per se. His lack of postseason success doesn't help. And so when I look at the two coaches, for me, that's a wash. How I kind of break them down. Do you have any thoughts on the two coaches in this game? Where do you see them going?
No, you're right. The maturity in Coach Frank Reich has been very surprising this year. We look at an entire change in that offense. Last year it was the Deshaun Watson show and how many times a game is he going to pass it, 40 or 45, and that's been cut down. He's really playing it safe with his quarterback. It's an efficient offense, and that defense has certainly surprised some people. Struggled early on, but man, have they made improvements. In fact, they went on quite a long game stretch leaning on their running game, their efficiency, and their defense. I've been very impressed with the coaching there.
Yeah, so I want to talk about pass offense. Now, before we get into which team has better pass offense, I don't think you can talk about that without talking about the offensive line. Obviously, I don't care how good of weapons you have. If you don't have an offensive line, it doesn't matter. The Colts offensive line allowed only 18 sacks. That was a league best this year. They were the best at protecting their quarterback, whereas the Texans offensive line allowed 62 sacks this year, worst in the NFL. So they're polar opposites in this game here. I also look at weapons in this when I talk about offense. You know, you look at DeAndre Hopkins. He's a great wide receiver. He's just as good, if not better, than Antonio Brown, Beckham, Julio Jones, and those guys. He's a great wide receiver. But after that, I think that's going to hurt the Texans. They lost Will Fuller. Demaryius Thomas is now out. Their tight ends aren't strong, per se, in terms of passing. They might get Kiki QT back in this game. That'd be a nice boost for them there. Now you compare that to the Colts weapons. You have T.Y. Hilton. He's very underrated, yet a very, very good wide receiver. People don't realize just how talented he is. When him and Luck are on the field at the same time, going back to 2016, he actually led the NFL in passing yards there. Then, of course, you had Inman in there. Inman's a solid wide receiver. He's a vet, been around for a while. Rodgers and some others. Then you get to the tight end position, because that matters too. Look at Eric Ebron. Eric Ebron is a former first-round pick who struggled in Detroit but took off and exploded this year for the Colts. He has 14 touchdowns. And so I think that's really important because we've often pointed out in our videos, Andrew Luck targets his tight ends at a higher percentage than any other quarterback in the NFL. Then I look at the backs in this one in terms of passing. You've got Hines and Mack. I think they're better pass-catching backs than the combination of Miller, Blue, and Foreman are. If you look at Hines, Hines has quietly had 63 receptions this year. That's really good numbers. I think they're a nice 1-2 punch there. But you can't talk about offense, who's got the better pass offense, without talking about Luck versus Watson. That's what it really comes down to. And so for me, I look at one as a prototypical quarterback in Andrew Luck. And the other one is what I call a hybrid. Very athletic, can throw the ball. He's very good. Both organizations, you guys are set for years in terms of your franchise quarterback. Both of those quarterbacks are very good. But for me, Andrew Luck was second this year with 39 touchdown passes to Pat Mahomes. He's at a career best quarterback rating. So I'm going to give a slight edge to the veteran Luck in this one. And I'm going to say the Colts are a better pass offense. Anything you want to add to that?
All right, yeah, here's the thing. I absolutely love what Andrew Luck has been doing. I love the Colts offense, and I had the Colts, and I had the Colts as the better pass offense, and the last second I changed my mind, and a few reasons why. One of them comes down to Eric Ebron. 14 touchdown passes, that's phenomenal. But if you look at the tight end that he was last year versus the tight end that he is this year, he has almost identical yard markers. And to me, that says he hasn't improved as a tight end. He's merely capitalized on that offense and stolen touchdowns from the players around him. That is one thing for me that said, okay, he's been an okay tight end, but he's really been just a red zone threat, and I'd honestly like to see him do a little bit more things there, get some more yards or some more catches right, and improve in some of those areas. I have to agree with you as far as the pass blocking goes. The offensive line for the Colts is much better, but Deshaun Watson is a very, very effective running quarterback, and I think that that's something that really eliminates some fears for me as far as how that's going to work out. And then when it comes to the wide receivers, I understand that there's been some injuries, but the Houston Texans still have a better wide receiving core. Hopkins, in my mind, is better than T.Y. Hilton. I think that to me is clear cut. I don't know. I've always felt that way. I feel the numbers support that. And on top of that, Demaryius Thomas may be out, but he hasn't really been phenomenal for them, and he hasn't even been there for the whole season. Will Fuller's been out, but Kiki Kuti, he should be playing in this game, and he has played well when he has played, and so that, of course, bodes very well for them. And then the other thing that I really like is I talk about the efficiency. Deshaun Watson is having a great, great year, very effective year. They've limited his passing simply because the stats haven't needed to be better. They've been efficient. They've been moving the ball properly, not forcing turnovers. They just haven't been asking much of him, and I imagine if they really needed to let him loose to throw for more yards, throw for more touchdowns, they could do that. He looks like a great quarterback. It looks like a great offense. They're just saying they just don't need him to throw that many yards, and so that's a boost that I give to him. As far as the running backs in the backfield, the Colts do have the better running backs catching out of the backfield. However, I'm not a huge Hines fan. I'm a Marlon Mack fan, yes, but he is a bit more running, a little less receiving. And then again, you come to that tight ends. Of course, Jack Doyle is out, so it just leaves Eric Ebron, which I haven't been all that impressed with. It was very, very close, but I just gave the slight edge to the Houston Texans.
All right. Talk about rush offense there. So you look at who's a better team in terms of running the ball there. Okay, look at the Colts and the Texans. You got Lamar Miller, Foreman, and Blue versus Hines, Mack, and Wilkins. So look at Lamar Miller. After 4 seasons that he declined, he really had a resurgence this year. He ended up the year with 4.6 yards per carry. 4 times in the last 9 games, he's broken over 100 yards rushing. And during that same stretch, he had 702 yards rushing with a 5.12 yards per carry. He's really turned it around there quite a bit. Now, Foreman, I like Foreman quite a bit. He's very talented, but he's recovering from Achilles injury. And he's got a long way to get back to where he was last year. Then Blue is yards per carry for his career at 3.6. He's solid, but not spectacular running back there. Now, look at Wilkins, Hines, and Mack. I think they're more versatile backs than the other backs there. Now, Hines offers something that the Texans don't have in terms of just a smart back, great on third downs, passing situations. He's different than the other ones. You look at the backs for the Texans, they're big, physical, they love to pound the ball. The smallest back of the 3 is actually Lamar Miller. Mack had a very nice season, second season right now. He ended up with over 900 rushing yards in 12 games. He also added 10 touchdowns. Now, I like to take the Indy backs over the Texans. I like to say Indianapolis got a better rush offense, but here's the difference maker for me. It's Watson's legs. Watson had 551 rushing yards for the year, and that gives the Texans the edge in the running game for me.
Yeah, I don't want to spend too much time talking about it, but really that running attack is the weakness of the Indianapolis Colts. Only 13 rushing touchdowns to 17 fumbles. That right there is the Achilles heel of not only that offense, but that team as a whole. And so I definitely have to say that I'm just going to give the edge to the Texans, who aren't the most amazing or flashy run offense out there, but they're getting the job done, and they're certainly not turning the ball over quite as much. Let's talk about the defenses now. We got to get to that.
Yeah, okay, we'll start with defense. Look at pass defense, right? So I look at the Colts. The Colts is a very talented, young defense. They got a lot of talent, but like I said, they're young and inexperienced at many positions, so that's a little bit concerning for me. Now, the Texans are 28th in the NFL in passing yards allowed per game at 260. That's where the Texans struggle is against the pass there. They can be exposed if the offensive line can protect Andrew Luck in this one. Now, really, it comes down to me. I look at this, the unstoppable pass rush of the Texans versus the unmovable object of the offensive line for the Colts. Who wins out? Like I said, the Colts only give up 18 sacks the entire year, but 6 of those were in 2 games versus the Texans. So the Texans were able to get to Andrew Luck in those games. They're younger, but when I look at pass defense, the numbers are pretty clear that the Colts are just a better pass defense team at this point. So.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, especially when you look at the fact that you see those numbers side by side and then realize the Texans have really kept some low scoring games and the Colts more high scoring games. Of course, higher scoring, more passing, lower scoring, more running. That's obvious, but is something to note. Sometimes looking at the statistics, it's important just to stop and remember. As a whole, I am more impressed with the Houston Texans defense, but we'll get to a little bit more of that in a second when we get to the run. I don't have much to say other than to agree with you. I do like the safeties there, Tyrann Mathieu and Reed. They're good, but some of the cornerbacks are lacking a little bit. Their linebackers aren't great in coverage, and even Mathieu and Reed, very good safeties, very talented. Look like they're going to have be good going forward at that position. Have been very hit or miss. Sometimes they can make really great plays, and sometimes they just mess up and leave guys wide open. And so that is a big fear with them in that pass defense. Is just their hit or miss tendency.
Yeah, so when I look at run defense, that's the next thing. We'll look at two parts of these defenses here. Both defenses are good at stopping the run. Indianapolis is 8th in the league in stopping the run, allowing 101 yards per game. But the Texans are great at stopping the run. They're 3rd in the NFL, only allowing around 82 yards per game. The Texans' run defense is much better than the Colts. Now, if you look at the overall defenses at this point, because I think that's important, we can look at pass, we look at run defense, but the overall defense, Texans are 4th overall in defense, allowing 19.8 points per game. Now, they were bad the first 4 games of the year. First 4 games, they allowed 27 points per game, but then the last 12, only 17.3, so they improved quite a bit. Now, we talked about how their defensive backs can be exposed there, but their front 7 is dangerous. You got a healthy Watt, 16 sacks, Clowney with 9, Merciless, so their front 7 is, I think, where that defense finds its strength there. Right now, Indianapolis at 10th in the league, allowing 21.5 points per game. But during their last 10 games, which they've been on fire, the last 10 games only allowing 16.4 points per game. That defense has improved quite a bit there. But when it's all said and done, I got to give the edge defensively to the Texans, especially playing at home with the crowd noise. So I think their defense is better of the two.
Yeah, absolutely. Not to mention their average, I completely agree with you. Like I said, not to mention they're averaging just 5.4 yards per play. That is one of the best in the NFL. So basically teams against them are averaging only 5.5 yards per play. That is super, that's extremely low. A lot of teams are averaging 7 up towards 8. They've just been extremely impressive. And one thing that I did mention earlier was how bad that offensive line is. One thing I don't want to I did give the edge to the Texans, but I do want to be truthful. That offensive line is awful. I didn't mention this earlier, but they've given up 62 sacks. That's a sack on 10.9% of passing plays. And so that is something to remember because I just had the note there. But yeah, you're absolutely right. 19.8 points per game. That's 4th best in the NFL. As a whole, I got to give this to the Houston Texans as far as who I think is going to win this game. Talk about the intangibles, the things that are notable apart from just the passing and rushing defense and offense. Really, for me, it comes down to the Houston Texans being a more complete team. When you look at what happened to the Colts when they played Jacksonville, that running game struggled because Andrew Luck struggled, and that defense couldn't do anything. They ended up losing 6-0. They feel too reliant on Andrew Luck to me, and I really appreciate the Texans having a very, very talented, one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, in Deshaun Watson, and saying, we're going to limit him. We can win without him being amazing, and so I give that edge to the Texans in this game.
All right, so for me, the intangibles, notables. Home field advantage is going to be nice for the Texans, but the Colts are 9-1 last 10 games. They are surging. They had a mix in there. They'd have a 6-0 loss to the Jags. Those two teams are 1-1 versus each other this year, with the last game, the Colts winning in Texas there when they played. I think that's huge. But for me, I look at Indianapolis. They're hot right now. They've got a veteran quarterback, a very young, talented defense. So I'm taking the Colts in a close game, but I'm predicting the Colts 27-24 victory over the Texans.
Absolutely. You can't forget the fact that the Colts have a 48.6% completion percentage on third down, a percentage of completing third down conversions, and on top of that, a 68.8% touchdown percentage when they find the red zone. So they've been very efficient in taking their opportunities.
All right. Is that it? Ready to move on to the next game?
Ready.
Let's do that. Chargers versus the Ravens. So do you want me to get going on this one?
Yeah, you can get started.
So let's talk about Coach John Harbaugh. 7 postseason appearances. He's 10-5 overall in the postseason with 1 Super Bowl victory. Anthony Lynn, second-year coach, has done a very nice job with the organization, 21-11 in the last 2 years. It's his first postseason game. So to me, the edge goes to the Ravens coach there in that one.
Oh, I think that's clear. Not only have they consistently made playoffs so many years throughout his tenure there, on top of that, they've won a Super Bowl. And I talk about the maturity switching from Joe Flacco to the rookie Lamar Jackson has been extremely impressive. They went from 5-5 to then going 5-1 after that and finished the season at 10-6 and finding their way in the playoffs, winning the division. Been very impressed with John Harbaugh, though I'm a little bit biased. I gotta admit I do love the Ravens.
You got a man crush on
just
the Ravens,
a little bit, yeah.
So talk about pass offense. So Philip Rivers versus Lamar Jackson. This is a no-brainer, obviously. Lamar Jackson's been fun to watch. He's got a lot of talent, very athletic, but he's got a long way to go to become a great passing quarterback in the NFL. He's very deficient in that area. Wide receivers for me. Look at the two wide receivers of each team. For the Chargers, you got Mike Williams, first-round pick last season. He's got 10 touchdowns on the year. Terrell Williams, and a great possession receiver in Keenan Allen versus Crabtree, Brown, and Snead. It's not even close. That's not even close. Chargers have the better wide receivers. As far as tight ends go, so the Ravens got Andrews, Hurst, and some others that are improving. Then the Chargers have Antonio Gates, great guy, but he's at the end of his career, he's slower. Here's the thing, though. Hunter Henry is going to be back for the game. And so I got to give the edge right there to the Chargers also. It's not even debatable. The Chargers are just much better when it comes to throwing the ball. They're better pass offense for me.
Yeah, there's really no arguing it. When the best game for your quarterback is 202 yards passing, you just don't have a good passing offense. That's nothing against Jackson or that team, but the Ravens don't have the passing offense to even compete with Philip Rivers. And you talk about all the weapons that they have. They're absolutely phenomenal. Looking at Rivers has a 105.5 passer rating. They're averaging 8.5 yards per attempt. That's even better than Drew Brees and the Saints, who are averaging just 8.2 yards per attempt. That is a much better passing offense for sure.
So let's look at the rush offense there. Chargers have great backs. Melvin Gordon had a breakout year. He's always been a good back, but we called him a volume play because his yards per carry for his career, I think 3.9. This year he blew up. He looked great. You look at Austin Eckler, is a great change of pace back there. And now Jackson has shown he's a legitimate back in the league. So they have three very good running backs. If you look at just the running back straight up, I give it to the Chargers. Now you got Kenneth Dixon. I like him. He's a very good three-down back. And Gus Edwards can run hard between the tackles. He's big. He's physical. But Lamar Jackson is a difference maker. Baltimore are second in the league. They average 152 rushing yards per game. But since Lamar Jackson has taken over, they have been unstoppable running the ball. So in 9 games when Joe Flacco was the quarterback, they only averaged 93 rushing yards per game, so they didn't run the ball really great there. Since Lamar took over, the Rams have rushed for 267 yards, 242, 207, 194, 242, and last week they had 296 rushing yards. That's an insane average of 242 rushing yards per game with Lamar Jackson at quarterback. That's a huge edge to the Ravens there. They can run the ball really well, and they're going to pound it.
Keep in mind, at that pace, they would have finished with the most rushing yards for a team in a single season had they had him throughout the whole year. So that's very interesting to look at. Yeah, I just give the edge to the Ravens because of how they've been running lately. I like Melvin Gordon more than any other running back playing for the Ravens. I really do. He's averaging 5.1 yards per carry, as well as Austin Eckler's 5.2 yards per carry. They have been extremely productive. But the way the Ravens lean on their run game and use Lamar Jackson to open that up with his legs, it's inarguable that they've averaged more rushing yards over the last 5 or 6 or 7 games than the Chargers have. The facts are kind of the facts. They've just been more effective. There's not much to say there, in my personal opinion.
Yeah, let's get to the defenses now. This one's they're both very good defenses. As far as pass defense goes, you look at the Ravens are 5th and the Chargers are 8th in pass defense on the year, so the Ravens have a slight edge there. But as far as overall defense go, the Ravens are 2nd in the NFL, allowing 17.9 points per game. Number 1 is Chicago Bears, obviously. Chargers are 8th at 20.6. Now, the Chargers missed Joey Bosa early in the year, but he's back, he's healthy, he's getting better each game. Since week 5, the Chargers are only allowing 17.4 points per game, right around the Ravens number there. They're very close defensively. If we look at recent performances, here's the thing I think is a difference maker. Sometimes defenses can look really good against some bad offenses. But the Ravens have faced Atlanta, Tampa Bay, Chargers, and Kansas City. Now, you can say whatever you want when Tampa Bay and Atlanta, they didn't have a good year, but those offenses of those 4 teams are very good, and the Ravens shut them down. And so this is a defense. It doesn't matter who you face. They are matchup-proof defense. They're very good. And they're overall first in the yards allowed, only allowing 292 yards per game. So whether it's pass defense or rush defense, I give it both to Baltimore.
Yeah, that was something very difficult for me to look at. I give the advantage to the Chargers as far as pass defense goes. They have 38 sacks on the year, and 29 forced turnovers. I'm really impressed with that secondary, and Joey Bosa is so physical and so dominant on that line at getting pressure on guys that I'm going to give the advantage to the Chargers in pass defense by just very, very close. For me, it was essentially a tiebreaker. Honestly, I had a hard time deciding, but I'm going to give the edge to the Chargers. I really like the way that they have developed Darwin there and everything like that. That secondary has really impressed me lately. Got to easily give it to the Ravens, however. They're giving up just 18 points per game and only 3.7 yards per carry. They have been so dominant on defense, especially those front seven. That to me is hands down to the Ravens.
All right, so we look at the intangibles. So for me, I look at, you want to go with the intangibles or me first?
I'll go first. Why not?
Yeah.
For me, the intangible comes down to Lamar Jackson, and I just don't trust Lamar Jackson to win them multiple games, to have a great playoffs. He hasn't been fantastic. First off, I've already talked about the fact that he has only had one game over 200 yards passing, just 202. On top of that, he has given up at least one turnover in every game since he took over as the starting quarterback. Not to mention, Flacco gave up sacks on 4.1% of plays, whereas Lamar Jackson is giving up sacks on 8.6% of plays. And then finally, we talked about, and you talked about this in many other videos earlier in the regular fantasy season, in 5 of his 6 last games, he's played the 28th, 29th, 30th, 31st, and 32nd worst pass defenses in the NFL, and he still wasn't getting it done. In my mind, I can't trust the Ravens to win this game. I do have the Chargers winning. Anyways, I just can't trust them to win when you have a quarterback that's probably not going to throw for 200 yards. I just can't trust that they're going to be able to win that game when he's struggling turning over the ball over and giving up sacks that much.
All right, so for me here, my tangibles. Right now, the Chargers are 7-1 on the road, so that helps. They have to travel, but they played well on the road. But they are a warm weather team. They're going to be on the road in cold weather. Now, the Chargers had 4 losses this year, and 3 of them were against very good teams, against the Rams, Saints, and the Ravens. It is important to note that when the Ravens played them, they shut them down quite a bit there. Now, the Ravens are 6-1 since Lamar Jackson took over, and one of those losses, or the only loss since he took over, was a 3-point loss to Kansas City in Kansas City, so they've been very good with him at quarterback. I'm taking the Ravens in this one. I think this team is designed for the playoffs. I'm an old school guy. I like teams in the postseason that play physical. They have an unstoppable running game, and they play great defense. That smash mouth football, I think, is so huge and so important come postseason. So I'm going to take the Ravens in a 20-16 victory over the Chargers.
All right.
Let's get to the Eagles versus the Bears. You want to get us started there with the coaches?
Yeah, I'll get us started there, and for me, I got to give the advantage to the Bears. Now, I've been very impressed with the Eagles coaching staff. They have done a fantastic job in working with some of the injured and banged up pieces that they've had this year. However, I'm going to give advantage to the Bears, and I'll tell you why. Not only have I been impressed with the way Nagy has been able to put together an elite defense and a manageable offense with pieces last year that everyone was embarrassed of. We thought they were bad and needed to scrap that whole offense and plenty of things. But man, I think what really brings it all together for me, when you compare the volatility and the stability of these two teams, the Bears are one of the most stable teams in the NFL, whereas the Eagles, from week to week, you don't know how those guys are going to play or what you're going to get. One week Foles is amazing, the next week he stinks. I just don't feel like I can trust them. I see a lot of maturity in the coaching staff from the Bears, from that consistency and that maturity, using those offensive pieces right, leaning on their defense and working with multiple different running backs and, about 4 or 5 different wide receivers to get the job done. I got to give the advantage to the Bears on this one.
Okay, so for me, you got third-year coach Doug Peterson. This is his second postseason. Last year, he wins the Super Bowl versus first-year coach Matt Nagy, who's done a great job. But for me, I've got to go with Peterson. I love this guy. He's creative. He's willing to take chances. Won the Super Bowl last year. Even what he's done to overcome some injuries that he's had to his starting quarterback back-to-back years. For me, I give the slight edge to Peterson. Once again, I like Matt Nagy. Did an amazing job, but I got to go the other direction. How about pass offense? What are your thoughts there?
All right. Well, I think to me it's pretty clear that you got to go with the Eagles passing offense. Not only are they averaging 7.6 yards per attempt in the air, that is one of the best in the NFL. That is very effective. They only have 11 interceptions on the year, only 4 of those by Nick Foles. So that, of course, has been very impressive. You got to talk about the weapons. Not only is that offensive line one of the 10 best in the NFL, they've got insane weapons. Zach Ertz, probably the 3rd best tight end in the NFL. Wendell Smallwood and Darren Sproles out of the backfield are more than been good enough to get the job done. Alshon Jeffrey's been very effective, especially near the red zone. Golden Tate's a great PPR guy. Nelson Aguilar's your deep threat. I mean, you just talk about all these countless weapons. They are able to get the job done and throw the ball very, very effectively. Been very impressed with that Eagles passing offense, especially with Nick Foles in. I know that a lot of people like Carson Wentz more, and I'm not saying Foles is better, but Foles is getting the job done. In fact, they are 3-1 with Foles playing this season, winning their games by an average of 9.5 points per game. That's actually a lot better than it sounds. You compare that to the Chiefs are winning their games by only 8.47 points per game.
All right, so look at Foles versus Trubisky. So a lot of people are calling Nick Foles a magic man. He got hot last season, came in, took him to the Super Bowl, they won the whole thing, and he's carried him back to the postseason again this year after Wentz has went down in back-to-back years. I think, to me, Wentz is a better quarterback. He's the franchise quarterback of that team, but you cannot ignore what Nick Foles has done there. He's been great. He beat the Rams, Texans, and the Skins this year to get to the postseason when everybody expected they were done. Now look at Mitch Trubisky. He's really turned a corner this year. He's looked good in Matt Nagy's offense. His legs and ability to run are really a game changer for me. That's the one thing he brings that Nick Foles does not have. Now, the concern I have for Mitch is his first year in the postseason. How is he going to handle the pressure? When you compare him to Foles, who's shown that guy's got ice in his veins. Obviously, he's been there. He's been to the big dance. He's won the whole thing. He shows he can handle the pressure. So I give the edge to Nick Foles there, but very, very small edge. As far as wide receivers go, you get Robinson, Miller, and Gabriel versus Jeffrey, Tate, and Nelson Aguilar. And so Miller most likely is going to be out with a separated shoulder. I got to give the edge to the Eagles wide receivers in this one. For me, that one's pretty clear. As far as pass-catching backs go, you got Tariq Cohen. He's a great pass-catching back, but Sproles and Smallwood are also very good in themselves, and you have two of them. So to me, that's pretty much a wash. But here's where I give a big edge to the Eagles in the passing game. You got tight end Burton. Trey Burton's been a quality tight end for the Bears. But Zach Ertz is a great tight end, and Dallas Goedert is a very good tight end, who if he was on another team would be a star there. So those tight ends push them over the edge. The Eagles, for me, are a better passing team. All right.
I think we got to talk about the defenses now. These are actually some pretty impressive defenses.
We're going to talk about run offense, right?
I suppose we can talk about that.
We could go back. But yeah,
I suppose that matters. You know, to me, honestly, talk about the Eagles. Not been hugely impressed with their running game this year. Of course, I'm not the only one. They're averaging only 3.4 yards per carry. And I know a lot of these are from the quarterbacks, but they have 29 fumbles this year. Like, they cannot lean on that running game. Not to mention, the Bears have the 11th best rushing attack in the NFL, averaging 121 rushing yards per game. They have been very, very effective on the ground. So I've got to lean the Bears on that one.
Okay, so for me, I look at Sproles. I think he's a nice change of pace back. Smallwood's a decent play. Josh Adams brought some quality carries to that team. Now, if you're asking me this 6 weeks ago, I would have said Eagles for sure. And the reason why is because Jordan Howard had struggled quite a bit. But in the last 5 games, he's really picked it up, and that needed to happen. Tariq Cohen is a great weapon. He's a nice complement, but he's not a workhorse. He's a smaller back there. The team needed a back that could pound that ball. Well, in the last 5 games, Howard has a 4.53 yards per carry, and he's had twice in those 5 games over 100 yards rushing. So I look at Jordan Howard, Tariq Cohen, and to me, they're a nice complement. They complement one another's skill set very well. So I give a small edge to the Bears' run offense. Not quite a bit, but a little bit. So that's where I give them the advantage. So
all right,
let's get to defense.
So I think we got to talk about, first off, that pass defense. And for me, this was very close. I ended up giving it to the Bears because I think the Bears as a whole unit are a better defense. But let's stop and give some recognition to the Eagles, who have 44 sacks and 133 hits on the quarterback this season. You can say what you want, but they're getting pressure on the quarterback. The problem for them comes in their secondary. Their secondary has very much struggled with injuries and just certainly hasn't performed. On top of that, the Bears have been just a little bit better. They've had 50 sacks this year, 18 forced fumbles, 27 interceptions, and 5 defensive touchdowns. That I think the Bears' pass defense is better.
All right, so for me, look at the Eagles' pass defense. That Eagles' pass defense is bad. They're 30th in NFL, allowing 269 passing yards per game. They're bad. Now, if I compare them to the Bears lead in the NFL in takeaways with 36, second in the NFL with 50 sacks, first in run defense allowing 80 yards per game, and they're first in the NFL, only allowing 17.7 points per game. For me, I give a huge advantage to the Bears defense in this one. I like them quite a bit. I think they're as good as the Ravens are. I think this Bears defense might be slightly better, so I give them the advantage. What about intangibles for you?
Yeah, so you come to intangibles. First thing I think the intangible to note is the Bears plus 12 turnover differential. That's third best in the NFL. If you're going to win games in the playoffs, you've got to take care of that rock, and you can't be giving away easy drives to the other team. That right there is definitely something that I like as far as the Bears go, but I got to give the Eagles this because of just how hot they've been lately. One thing, it's really hard to play a team when you've seen what their quarterback can do, but you have a lot less game film on Nick Foles. That certainly hurts. Their winning streak lately, they have been hot. I mean, heck, they had to win how many games in a row to get in the playoffs, and they had to just hope the Vikings would lose, which of course is never great to be a team going into the playoffs that needs someone else to lose for you to get in. But you can't argue how they stumbled through the beginning of the season and really pushed hard at the end. They're doing things so well, like 29 forced fumbles and 21 of those recovered, 133 hits on the quarterbacks. I mean, they have just been so effective this year in a lot of ways that people don't consider. The only reason that we're talking about them as a wild card team and not a division winner is because Carson Wentz's injury, Jay Ajayi's injury, Corey Clement's injury, banged up wide receivers in Jeffrey and Aguilar, that entire defensive back set, and I believe in additionally an offensive lineman. They have just been riddled with injuries. It has nothing to do with their team, but has everything to do with the injuries that they've faced. So I'm going to give the advantage to the Eagles.
All right. So for me, it comes down to home field advantage of the Bears. They're playing at home in the cold. It's going to be huge for them. They're 9-1 last 10 games after starting 3-3. This team's really hot right now. Look at point differential. The Bears are plus 138. The Eagles 19. So for me, the Eagles, they have to overcome, like you talked about, losses that they've had to some of their players, injuries, and the fact that last year they were amazing, but they had home field advantage. Now they've got to go on the road. To me, I take the Bears. The Bears winning 31-21 over the Eagles.
All right. So here we come in the Cowboys versus the Seahawks. This should be an interesting game. Do you want to get started?
Yeah, we'll start with Coach Pete Carroll versus Jason Garrett there. So for Jason, it's his third postseason appearance. He's been 1-2 overall in the postseason, and generally speaking, he's been disappointing. Often the rumors that he's been on the chopping block there. So I look at Carroll. It's his ninth postseason. He's gone 10-7 in postseason. He won the Super Bowl in 2013 and just missed it the following year there. I like what Pete Carroll's done this year. I love the fact that he's been willing to really change, and he's been willing to flex. And midway through the season, he kind of shifted his philosophy and began to work to the team's strengths and weaknesses and made some adjustments. So I really got to give the overall edge to me to Pete Carroll in this one. I like him of the two coaches better.
Yeah, I think you got to give it to Pete Carroll. You look at not only how he managed to turn a bunch of players we've never seen before into a good defense, but you change the identity of that offense. And you talk about the pure creativity. You know how hard it is to play the Seattle Seahawks when you don't know what you're going to get against them. I don't know a lot of people know this, but the Seahawks run a sixth offensive lineman on 20% of offensive downs. You know how weird that is for a defense to go out there and all of a sudden the package has entirely changed? Of course, that's something that they can study and they get used to. But the creativity, the playoff experience, I got to give it to Pete Carroll and that coaching staff there for Seattle. And what about the passing attack?
So you got Dak Prescott versus Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson is the better quarterback. Both quarterbacks can run, but Wilson has shown over and over he is a playmaker. He's poised. He's a great quarterback there. For me, I give the edge to Wilson in this one. He's having his best season as a pro in terms of his quarterback rating right now, which is 110. 4 times in his 7 seasons he's had a quarterback rating over 100. This guy's been great. This is his best season in terms of passing touchdowns. He had 35 in a run-first offense. He ended up with 35 touchdown passes, which is great. In the history of the NFL, he's the number 2 quarterback in his career quarterback rating. Number 1 is Aaron Rodgers. He's number 2 overall in the entire history of the NFL. And so I got to give the edge to Wilson there. As far as wide receivers, got Baldwin, Lockett, Brown versus Cooper, Beasley, Gallup, and some others. To me, this one's closer. The trade for Amari Cooper was huge for that team. I like Doug Baldwin quite a bit, but he's less than 100% this year. He's been banged up quite a bit. All things considered, if I could say Doug Baldwin was 100%, I might give him the edge, but I'm going to give a slight edge in wide receivers to the Cowboys. But that edge is so small, it's almost impossible to measure. As far as tight ends go, neither team has great tight ends that I think are game changers in this one. It's a wash. You look at Elliott. Elliott's a great pass-catching back, but Davis and Penny or others are comparable. They're pretty decent out of the backfield. But for me, it all comes down to the veteran quarterback play of Russell Wilson. I give Seattle the edge in terms of passing the ball.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. While there are concerns like the fact that they're giving up sacks on 10.8% of passing plays and only averaging 6.5 yards per passing attempt, there's a lot going well with Seattle. 35 passing touchdowns is huge, and I don't think they're the best passing team in the NFL, but you talk about that efficiency, that's kind of by choice and by design of that offense, as well as they're not competing against a very good passing attack to compare themselves to. Dallas Cowboys are 23rd in the NFL, throwing just 221 passing yards per game. And that boost with Amari Cooper certainly helps, but not that much. You look, he came on right away and he was very hot, but the last couple of games this season, he did struggle a little bit more. I think teams are starting to figure that out and cover him a little bit more. He is certainly a huge advantage to that offense, but you still got to give it to Russell Wilson and the Seahawks. And again, you talk about that creativity and that efficiency of how they're able to get things going.
So what about run offense? So I look at this here. How do we break this down? Currently, Seattle is number 1 in the NFL in terms of rushing yards per game. They love to pound the ball over and over to set up play action to protect Wilson in a below-average pass-blocking offensive line. That's why they made that adjustment, because that offensive line, Russell Wilson had been beat up. He was probably the most hit quarterback, I think, there for a couple years in a row. Dallas offensive line is rated by many to be the best run blocking group in the NFL, and Ezekiel Elliott is a great back. Unlike Carson, Davis, and Penny, who are very good, Ezekiel Elliott is a game-changing top 5 back in the NFL. He is a phenomenal talent. Now, both quarterbacks can run the ball there, but at this point, Dak's a little bit younger, and he's had 3 consecutive years with 6 rushing touchdowns, so I think he's the better of the 2 quarterbacks in terms of running the ball there. Now, if you look at Seattle, have more total yards. When I look at Dallas's yards per carry and effectiveness running, I think they're a better team running the ball. Even though they might have the total numbers there, the volume's not there, I think they're just better. You look at that offensive line, Ezekiel Elliott, I got to give the edge to the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. What Seattle's done in the running game has been impressive, but it's kind of just because they've sat down and gritted their teeth and say, we're going to run the ball 50 times a game or 30 times a game. Like, we're just going to pound the rock. And, that's great. That's awesome. But it just means they're getting more volume. It doesn't make them better runners. Ezekiel Elliott is still Ezekiel Elliott, and the Dallas Cowboys still have the 10th best rushing attack in the NFL, averaging over 120 rushing yards per game. So there's certainly been very effective there, and 4.5 yards per carry as a team has also been very good.
So how about defense? I need to break that down. Support. I think Dallas's defense is underrated. That linebacking core for Dallas is amazing. They're going to be the best linebacking core in the league for many years to come there. Sean Lee, who's an all-pro linebacker, right? He missed some time due to injury. He's come back now, but due to the play of Van Der Esch and Jalen Smith, he's essentially the 3rd best linebacker on that team. That tells you just how good that linebacking core is. Dallas is 6th in the NFL overall in defense right now. In the last 8 games, they're only allowing 18-plus points per game, including an impressive game versus the Saints, which they held into 10 points. Now, I got to give a ton of credit to Seattle. They lost so many players on defense. I thought that defense was going to be atrocious. They lost Thomas, Sherman Bennett, many others, but they've actually played very well. They played above average, but they're not a great defense. I got to give the edge defensively to Dallas in this one.
Yeah, they have played very, very well and been very impressive. Both have. Let's talk about the Seattle Seahawks. Just some kind of overall things. On a typical drive, the Seattle Seahawks are giving up just 5.6 plays per drive, 1.88 points per drive, and only 2 minutes and 38 seconds wasted on every drive against them. That defense, they're getting off the field fairly quickly compared to most defenses in the NFL, and they've actually been very, very effective, so I have definitely been impressed by them. I definitely think that Dallas is a little bit better. 31 turnovers on the season, 23 of those being fumbles. They play so physical and so aggressive. We saw what they did to the Saints. We've seen what they've done to a lot of teams this year. I definitely give the edge to the Cowboys, but not by a whole lot. I think some people are really hyped on the Cowboys and love the Cowboys right now, but I just think that they are above average and very good. I wouldn't quite call them elite. I also think Seattle is pretty good, and so again, give that edge to the Dallas Cowboys for sure. I definitely agree with you, but I don't want to make that seem like it's a huge gap. It is a minor gap.
Yeah, I'm not going to get a lot into intangibles. For me, Dallas, 7-1 last 8 games. They're hot. They have home field advantage, and for me, that gives them the edge. I'm picking Dallas 26-23 over the Seahawks.
All right, yeah, well, I give this advantage to the Seahawks. For me, the intangibles are the turnovers, man. The turnovers make the difference. And that this really comes down to the quarterback turning the ball over, the running backs. Dak Prescott has been sacked 56 times on the year. They have 19 fumbles and 9 interceptions, whereas the Russell Wilson and the Seahawks, Russell Wilson has 3.01 seconds to throw. That's one of the best in the league. He has been very effective in that sense. And Dak Prescott's only averaging His completions are only averaging 5.5 yards down the field. And so in the end, you talk about that ability to protect the quarterback and not turn the ball over. Russell Wilson has had a lot better luck this year in that sense. And so I think that's going to make all the difference in the world in keeping drives going by not losing yards on early downs and by giving them time on third down to complete passes. And of course, not letting their quarterback not throw interceptions and helping them not fumble the ball because of that pressure. So I give the advantage of the Seahawks.
All right.
All right, so there is our wild card weekend and our prediction of what we think is going to happen. Now, because we made different predictions, from now on, we're going to be talking about different games because we think that different things are going to happen. For example, this is your game, Rob. You've got Colts versus the Chiefs. I don't have the Colts winning, so I don't have this matchup. But, Rob, just get into it. I want to hear your breakdown. What do you think is going to happen?
Yeah, take a look at the two coaches in this game. You got Frank Wright versus Andy Reid. Andy Reid, 14 postseason appearances with a 11-14 record during those 14 postseason appearances, one Super Bowl appearance. He has historically underachieved in the postseason with some very, very good teams. That's been the one knock of Andy Reid. Great NFL coach, but he folds in the postseason. We saw that last year playing the Titans. Once again, had a big lead the first half. They should have walked away with that one, and they folded again. You look at Frank Wright. He's a rookie there. This probably doesn't translate to what kind of coach he's going to be, but as I thought about it, he was involved in the greatest comeback in NFL history. If you didn't know that, going back many years ago, he was a backup for the Buffalo Bills. You got Jim Kelly as a starter. They're playing the postseason. The Bills are down versus the Oilers 35-3 at halftime. They bench Jim Kelly. He comes in. He takes them back. They win. Once again, I'm not saying that's going to translate to him being a pressure quarterback in the postseason, but I look at Andy Reid once again, has struggled time and time again. All the pressure is on Andy Reid to perform. There's no pressure on Frank Reich in this one. I'm going to give the slight edge to Frank Reich as the coach. As far as pass offense goes, you got the number 1 and number 2 quarterbacks as far as passing touchdowns, one with 39, one with 50. Pat Mahomes should win the MVP this year. And I would take either one of these quarterbacks. They're both very talented. But Pat Mahomes is inexperienced. And Luck is having a great year, and he's a veteran who's been around for a while. I think that Pat's going to handle the pressure fine. I think he's going to have a great career, but I still would rather go with Andrew Luck at this point, who's got some postseason experience, who's been around for a while. I would prefer him. As far as weapons go, you got Tyreek Hill, Sammy Watkins, Conley versus Hilton, Inman, and others. It's really close there, but Sammy Watkins sounds like he's going to be good to go, and he's back, and that gives me the edge. I take the Kansas City receivers. I think they're better. As far as pass-catching backs, you got Hines and Mack versus Williams and Ware. I would give it to Hines and Mack. And then tight ends go Eric Ebron. 14 touchdowns for the year has been very, very good, but he is no Travis Kelce. Travis Kelce, his catches ability to move the sticks is great there. So I've got to give it to Kansas City. They're a better offense, scoring 35 points per game, and the Colts are scoring 30 or 27 points per game. So I had to give that passing edge to the Chiefs there. As far as run offenses go, losing Kareem Hunt really hurt the Chiefs there more than many people realize in many different ways there. Now, Damian Williams is where have been solid, but there's no Kareem Hunt. I got to give the edge to the Colts in this one. I would take Mack and Hines. I think they're better combination running backs there. As far as defense goes, so the Chiefs are allowing 26 points per game. That's 24th in the NFL. 14 spots worse than the Indianapolis Colts there. Now, if you look at the Chiefs' defense, they showed up against the Raiders, Cards, Jags, and the Bengals. Against those 4 teams, they only allowed 10.5 points per game. But against the other 12, against average offenses or better, they're allowing 31.7 points per game. That defense for Kansas City is bad. Once again, they will get after the quarterback. They will put pressure on the quarterback, but they give up a lot of yards. I think I say Indy's defense is better in this one, so I'm going to give the edge to the Colts defense. As far as intangibles go, right now Kansas City doesn't have a lot of momentum. They're 3-3 in their last 6 games, whereas the Colts are 9-1 in their last 10. Home field advantage does help, but luck's experience, the fact that Pat Mahomes is inexperienced, and Andy Reid's history of failures come postseason. I like the momentum of the Colts. I like the young talented defense for Indianapolis there. And so I'm taking Indy in an upset, 35-32.
All right, I like that. That's very interesting. All right, and so I had things happen a little bit differently. I had the Chargers beating the Ravens, which then puts them up to play against the Chiefs, I believe. And so here's the matchup right now. We got to talk about the Chargers. We mentioned a lot of this stuff earlier, but man, Phillip Rivers has been effective. A passer rating of 105.5, a crazy high 8.5 yards per attempt. Again, as I mentioned earlier, that's better than Drew Brees and the Saints. Been seriously effective lately. Talk about Melvin Gordon in that running game, averaging 5.1 yards per carry. In fact, they have a 64% red zone percentage. Essentially what that means is 64% of the time they get in the red zone, they score a touchdown. That's not to mention the field goals and other things that they do. That offense is built for efficiency. They have been very effective. They have 48 total touchdowns to 29 turnovers this year. Do turn over the ball a little bit, but I definitely like the Chargers offense. And talk about that defense again. I love some of the talent on that defense. 38 sacks and 29 forced turnovers. 29 forced turnovers is one of the best in the NFL for some reason. They're just very physical defense and being able to hit guys pretty darn hard, especially when you talk about those sacks and getting after the quarterback. Now we look at the Chiefs. Mahomes, man, 50 touchdowns, over 5,000 yards. Even better than Phillip Rivers, and 8.8 yards per attempt passing and a quarterback rating of 113. He has been phenomenal. There's no arguing it. I do give the passing game advantage to the Chiefs, but I got to give the running game advantage to the Chargers. The Chiefs, despite how effective their offense has been, only has 9 rushing touchdowns without Kareem Hunt this year. They do have 4.8 yards per carry, but definitely dipped their statistics a bit in the red zone. In fact, speaking of the red zone, their passing game keeps going, however. They score touchdowns on 71.8% of red zone trips, and their defense has been hot too. It hasn't been the most amazing defense, but 52 sacks and 105 hits on the quarterback this season. That D-line has been very effective at that. However, that defense is still not great. You got to look at the numbers. They're 31st in passing yards allowed, 22nd in passing touchdowns, 27th in rushing yards, 29th in rushing touchdowns, and 31st in rushing yards per attempt at 5 yards per attempt. And so that defense has a lot of big playmakers, but clearly no discipline, and that seems to be an issue with that defense right now, and some issues in the secondary. As a whole, I think that the Chiefs are going to win simply because I think that offense is better. I don't trust some of the things that the Chargers have going on there, and the Chiefs are just red hot. And almost no one has been able to stop the Chiefs this year at all. Remember, just back to that 54-51 game against the Rams. I mean, it's insane what Mahomes is doing. We talk about 50 touchdowns in his first career season as a starting quarterback. It is close. These are two very good teams, but again, I give that advantage to the Chiefs. Their running game loses by a little bit, but their passing game is better, and their running game is still very effective. And if they can do anything to stop that Chargers offense, they're definitely going to get the W.
All right. Take a look at the Ravens versus the Patriots. Start with head coach John Harbaugh, 7 postseason appearance, a 10-5 record with 1 Super Bowl victory versus arguably the greatest coach in NFL history, Bill Belichick. He's got 16 postseason appearances, a 27-10 record over those 16 games, and 5 Super Bowl victories. I got to give the advantage to Bill Belichick in this one here. Guy is, he's a great coach there. As far as pass offense, you got Lamar Jackson versus Tom Brady. Tom Brady looked like he declined a little bit this year, but he still had a very good season, 29 touchdown passes. Now you look at wide receivers, you got Edelman, Hogan, Dorsett, and Patterson versus Brown, Crabtree, and Snead. The Patriots are going to miss Josh Gordon quite a bit, but they still have the better wide receivers in this matchup, obviously, there. Dixon, running back there, is solid in the passing game for the Ravens, but he has no James White or Rex Burkhead. Those guys are much more effective in terms of running backs come out of the backfield there. As far as tight ends go, I would take Gronkowski over any Ravens tight ends there, so I got to give the advantage to the Patriots in this category in terms of passing offense. As far as run offense goes, Sony Michel's had a nice year. He looks great, but he's no Lamar, Gus, or Dixon. They are far better. Like we previously mentioned in the video, when Lamar Jackson has started, they're averaging 242 rushing yards per game. They're going to pound the ball against New England, who's allowing 30 more rushing yards per game than the Ravens there. So I got to give the advantage to the Ravens as far as running the ball goes. As far as defense goes, New England's 7th overall in defense, and the Ravens are 2nd overall in defense in the NFL, and they are 5th in pass defense there. You look at the recent performances that they've had. They shut down some very good offense. We talked about Atlanta, Tampa Bay, Chargers, Kansas City. So this is a defense that can shut down even the best quarterbacks out there. I think the Ravens are going to cause real trouble for Brady, and who's on the downside of his career, and a Gronkowski who just looks like he's lost a step this season. So I look at defense. I give the Ravens the advantage in this game there. Intangibles. The Patriots are perfect 8-0 at home this year, but they are 4-3 in the last 7 games. Gronkowski is struggling. They really needed Josh Gordon. This one, him being gone, is going to hurt them quite a bit. Their last quality win is versus the Bears going back to October 10th. Going back to October. That's 10 games ago. So I look at it, I think that defense and running the ball is going to dominate this game. I'm taking the Ravens in an upset. Justin Tucker will have a late field goal, and they win 24-21 over the Patriots.
All right, I like that. All right, so here we are now. I've got a little bit different scenario. In this one, I have the Patriots playing the Texans. This is actually, I think, a pretty boring game. I think it'll be interesting to watch, certainly. But these are 2 teams that I think control the football very well, play solid defense and solid offense. They're not lights out. They're not super amazing, but they're not awful in any one area. And the Patriots really embody this sort of football. Talk about their defense. They're allowing just drives of just 2 minutes and 28 seconds on average and only 5 plays per drive. That defense is slowing offenses down. That's very, very for sure. And then, of course, you look at that offense is very, very similar. Very effective, only 22 turnovers all year. Tom Brady is throwing for 11.6 yards per completion and only being sacked on 3.6% of passing plays. So they are very efficient, but maybe the most thing that tells you how effective they've been is that they're scoring on 40.8% of all drives. They are scoring points, either a field goal or a touchdown. And so the Patriots, of course, that passing game, none of those wide receivers are lights out. Gronk isn't who he used to be, but the running game is effective. Brady's getting the job done. Belichick is a genius. There's a very similar story on that defense. No huge playmakers, but everyone does their job. And so that's kind of my rundown for the Patriots. We've already talked about the Texans, but a bit of a reminder, Will Fuller is out, Thomas is out, Kiki Kuti will be playing but is banged up. Hopkins will be playing. He's, of course, very good. And that's my biggest concern for the Texans going into this game, is talking about Bill Belichick is a genius coach, and one of the things that Bill Belichick always does that everyone knows him for is, what is that, Rob? Is that he's going to take away your number one thing. What is it that you want to do? He's going to take that away. And for the Houston Texans, it's throwing to DeAndre Hopkins, and I think they're going to find a way to slow down but not stop Hopkins. I think that could very well hurt them if the Patriots succeed in that. On top of the pressure they're allowing, 62 sacks and sacks on 10.9% of all passing plays. That is bad. However, their defense is very good and their running game is good enough. Talk about they're allowing just 5.4 yards per play. That's one of the best in the NFL, and only giving up 19.8 points per game, which is 4th best in the NFL. This could certainly, if this ends up being a game, could certainly end up being a very low-scoring affair. And you talk about which of these 2 teams do I trust more. In a low-scoring defensive battle, it's not going to take much to win. A couple of field goals here or there, or one nice touchdown drive could certainly put one team over the edge. And so you have to ask yourself, which team do you trust more in that close sort of matchup? And I got to go with the Patriots. The maturity of Tom Brady, I trust him a lot more. I mean, You look at Deshaun Watson only had half a season last year, so the first half of this year was almost like his rookie year continued, and I just trust Brady and that offense a little bit more than I trust some of the issues that the Texans have.
Let's take a look at the Bears versus the Rams. Look at Coach. We already talked about Coach Nagy. I want to talk about him, but McVay, he's 24-8 record overall. He's at 2 division championships. Now, last year he lost in a highlight game where they're highly favored over the Falcons in the postseason. Now, when he took over that team, they were worse than the NFL in points scored. The previous year, when Fisher was the coach, they were only scoring 14 points per game. The first year he took over, they were number 1 in the NFL. He's done an amazing job there. The guy's like 32 years old. You got to love him as your head coach. What a great guy to have there. Nagy had a great first season, but I'm going to give the edge of coaching to McVay in this one. As far as pass offense go, the loss of Cooper Kupp has really hurt that offense. I think the more people realize there. Jared Goff loves to use that slot receiver as a safety valve, and he's one of the best slot receivers in the NFL. In fact, he's one of the best receivers in the NFL. I hope he recovers well. The Rams still have Cooks, Woods, and Todd Gurley has great hands there, and they're better than Burton Robinson, Tariq Cohen, and Gabriel. I got to give the advantage there to the weapons for the Rams. As far as Jared Goff versus Mitch Trubisky goes, Goff has improved. This is the second year in a row now that he's improved from his rookie year there. He improved in yards, touchdowns per game, and a higher quarterback rating. Now, he did turn it over more this year. He had 12 interceptions and 5 fumbles, which is 7 more turnovers than last year, which is a concern because he's facing the most opportunistic defense in the NFL with 36 takeaways, 27 being interceptions. So if he makes mistakes, they're going to be all over that. Mitch Trubisky also improved this year, but not as quickly as Jared Goff had. He's not as good of a pocket passer, but he's far more athletic. He's 5th in quarterback rushing yards right now, 5th in the NFL amongst quarterbacks rushing yards with 421. I think the Rams have a better offense, pass offense. I give them the advantage there. As far as run offense goes, you got Tariq Cohen and Jordan Howard. I think the great 1-2 punch. They're a nice complement to one another. They got different skill sets. But Todd Gurley is a great back. Barring injury at the end of his career, he's going to be a Hall of Famer when it's all said and done. The Rams' run offense is better. The Rams' run offense is better than the Bears. They are 3rd in the NFL, running 139 yards per game. That's what they are averaging. But they are facing the Bears that have the best run defense NFL, only allowing 82 per game, but I still got to give it, as far as run offenses go, I give it to the Rams there. As far as defense, talked about it already, Bears leading the NFL in takeaways with 36, they're 2nd in the NFL with 50 sacks, they're 1st in run defense, allowing only 80 rushing yards per game, they're 1st in points allowed at 17.7, whereas the Rams are 20th in yards allowed and 20th in points allowed. Now the Rams do create turnovers, that defense does, they're 3rd in the NFL in turnovers. But it doesn't matter who the Bears have faced this year. It doesn't matter. They've faced some very, very good offenses. They have shut them down, whereas I think the Rams' defense is what I would call matchup dependent to be successful. So consider this. Versus bad offenses. The Rams played Oakland, only allowed 13 points. They played Arizona twice. They shut them out one game and only allowed 9 the other one. And they played San Francisco, in which they only allowed 10 points. During those 4 games, that was only 8 points per game they allowed. The other 12, against better offenses, they allowed 29.33 points per game. Huge advantage to Khalil Mack in the Bears defense in this one. That defense is phenomenal. Intangibles. So last time they played, the Bears dominated the Rams. Now that was in Chicago, and it will be in LA, so they have home field advantage. But I will say this. It's hard to call LA and home field advantage. They're more known for Hollywood hangout than boisterous, loud football crowds. And that 70-degree sunny weather condition doesn't really hurt anybody. So if you're a cold weather team, it's not going to hurt you. Yes, it is home field, but I don't think it's that much of an advantage to really help them that much there. The Bears, after starting 3-3, are 9 in one last 10 games. And the last 4 games they played against good offenses, they faced the Rams, the Vikes, and the Packers. They've allowed 10.5 points per game. And the reason why I point that out is that defense is actually getting better and better as the year goes on. They're just gaining momentum there. I'm an old school guy. I think defense wins championships. And I think in this one, defense wins out. I'm taking the Bears over the Rams, 28-24. I think the Rams score late to make it closer than it probably is.
All right, I like that. Well, I have this game as well, and so you talked about a ton. I don't necessarily have a whole lot to add to that, but there are a few things. One, I want to cover a couple of concerns. One is for Goff. Since Cooper Kupp left, his production has dropped. With Cooper Kupp, Jared Goff was averaging 2.2 passing touchdowns per game. Now, without Kupp, he's averaging just 1.6. That's a major drop-off in their ability to pass the ball. As you mentioned, only scoring 6 points the last time they played the Bears is something that's also very scary. However, they are 2nd in points per game, 2nd in yards per game, 5th in passing yards per game, and 3rd in rushing yards per game. As you said, they do turn over the ball well, but it is important to remember that they're 4th best in the NFL for turnover differential with +11. the Rams do not get enough credit with some of the talented pieces that they have. They've got some good cornerbacks and safeties. Of course, we know about Aaron Donald. They've got some very talented guys on defense, and they're able to make plays. I feel like I'm beating a dead horse here, but the turnover battle could easily and probably will decide who wins this game. I ended up giving the advantage to the I ended up looking at this and having a very close time, and of course we gave advantages in coaching and rushing and passing and all that to very same things. I gave the intangibles to the Rams, and I thought this was a very tough affair because I hate trying to predict who's going to throw a pick. That seems very difficult to do sometimes, but I did give a slight advantage to the Bears.
All right. So, ready to move on? Let's look at the Cowboys versus the Saints. You look at coaches Jason Garrett. According to my prediction, he wins his first postseason game this year. That pushes his postseason record to 2-2 versus Sean Payton. He has 7 postseason appearances, 7-5 record during that time with the 1 Super Bowl win. It would be an 8-4 record if it wasn't for the Minnesota Miracle last year that knocked him out of the postseason there. I got to give the advantage to Coach Payton in this one. As far as pass offense go, you got Dak Prescott versus Drew Brees. Drew Brees is one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. He's having a great season. He's got his best quarterback rating ever of his career at 115.7, 32 touchdown passes, only 5 interceptions, and he broke the completion record this year. And you know who previously held it? Drew Brees. So he just set his own record again for the best completion percentage of all time in a single season for a quarterback there. Now you had Thomas, Ingram, again, and Kamara. I think they're better pass-catching options over Cooper, Beasley, Elliott. Saints are a better passing team there. As far as run offense goes, as far as being a pure runner, Ezekiel Elliott is that. I mean, he's a physical, he's that guy that can pound between the tackles. But as far as overall backs go, Alvin Kamara and Ingram are good. Now, the Dallas offensive line and the ability to run block, I think, makes them slightly better than the Saints. But I don't think they're going to be able to stick to the run too long in this game. I think they'll fall behind and have to throw the ball. So even though I think they can run the ball very well and effectively, I think it doesn't matter in this one because they're going to have to abandon the run probably in some place into the third corner there. But as far as just simply the ability to run the ball, I'd give the advantage to the Cowboys. As far as defense go, Dallas is 6th in points allowed, allowing 20.3 points per game, and the Saints are 14th in the NFL, allowing 22.1 points per game. Now, the Saints defense has gotten better and better, just like they did in 2017. In their last 7 games, the Saints defense, right? Now, I'm not going to count the last game versus the Panthers. That was a meaningless game that meant nothing. Most of the starters sat, so I'm just going to throw that right out the window. The previous 7 games before that, they're allowing only 14.1 points per game. They got the largest point differential of any team in the NFL. Heading into Week 17, their point differential was 170 points. I got to give the advantage to this one to the Saints. As far as intangibles go, you talk about home field advantage is going to matter for them. Teams are going to have to go in there. It's going to be very loud, indoor stadium. The crowd noise is going to be an issue. Now, I know Dallas did play very well versus the Saints, but that was in Dallas. Now they're going to New Orleans. So I got the Saints winning 31-20.
All right. All right, and I have the Seahawks versus the Saints, and man, this looks like it could shape up to be an extremely interesting game. I've already talked a lot about the Seahawks, but I haven't really been able to talk about the Saints, so I'll get to that. Drew Brees has just 2.59 seconds to throw the ball. That is one of the worst in the NFL, so that is something to note against a Seahawks defense that has been improving lately and starting to get after the quarterback a little bit. However, he still has managed a quarterback rating of 115.7, and that passing game has been insanely effective, 7.5 yards per attempt. But you know that running game has actually been a little bit of a disappointment this year. I know that a lot of people will be shocked to hear me say that, but did you know they're only averaging 4.3 yards per carry? From Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram, it needs to be better than that. It really does need to be better than that. And so that is something to note. However, the Saints are leading the league in time of possession and second best in the NFL for points per drive. They've been extremely effective and extremely efficient. Their defense has been good. They've forced 49 sacks and 31 turnovers, and you already mentioned it, but over the last 6-7 games, minus the last game of the season, which you really can't count, they're averaging just allowing 14 points per game. They've been extremely, extremely effective. Again, we look back at the Seahawks. Wilson has all the time in the world with 3.01 seconds to throw the ball. 35 touchdowns. He's been extremely effective in that area. Of course, one thing that I do like is he's throwing the ball less, which is more efficient, but I do like that he's thrown the ball tons in the past. And if they need him to do that, he can do that, and I absolutely trust his ability to. Of course, 2,500 yards rushing on 4.8 yards per carry. I really, really do appreciate and like that Seahawks running game. And of course, that defense is good, allowing just 5.6 plays per drive, 1.88 points per drive, and 2 minutes and 38 seconds per drive. In the end, I think the Saints are a better team, but I'm going to give an advantage here to the Seahawks. I think I'm going to give them the upset. Now, I understand that I think the Saints are the better team. How can I give them the upset? Well, first of all, I think when you're doing the playoffs, you got to pick an upset for one. How can you can't just pick who you think is the better team. It doesn't happen every time. But there's also a few key factors, and one that I don't like is that low time to throw the ball for Drew Brees. Really, outside of Michael Thomas, he doesn't have any weapons that I trust. Alvin Kamara out of the backfield is good, but when you talk about scheming, out of the backfield should not be your second best wide receiver, should not be your running back. Their tight ends are not great. Other than Thomas, none of their wideouts have impressed me. And he hasn't had a lot of time to work. A team like the Saints and Pete Carroll's creativity, I think that while I'm not guaranteeing this to happen, very well could they put together a scheme that could slow down that passing attack. And they don't have to do much to stop that running game, which is already only allowing 4.3 yards per carry. As I mentioned, it has certainly been underproducing. One thing that I don't like in that is that the Saints are one of the best run defenses in the NFL right now. However, I think the Seahawks are fine with that. We talk about how they've been leaning on their running game, averaging 4.8 yards per carry. They've been doing it in bulk. They've been doing it in lots of carries. I think they're going to be willing to stick with that and be fine with it. If they have to go to the passing game, they're getting Baldwin healthy. Lockett's been effective. They've got a couple of guys who can do things in the passing game. Of course, Mike Thomas is good pass blocker, and Penny's good in the passing game. Mike Davis is good in the passing game. A lot of different weapons there. But as far as the schemes go, I think the Seahawks will be perfectly fine and comfortable if their run game is slowed down. And if they need to turn to the pass game, I absolutely trust them in that. That secondary from the Saints, I just don't trust them very much. And so I think the Saints are the better team, but upset here, I think Seattle's going to win it.
I guess we'll have to see there. It's bold. So I'm not going to get to breaking all these things down, and the reason why I'm not going to do that is because we've talked a lot in this video about a lot of different intangible ideas, thoughts, whatnot, so you can just go back to that previous information. And in this game here, Bears at the Saints, I'm taking the Saints 27-19 over the Bears, and the reason why is the Saints are simply a more balanced team, more complete team playing at home. I think the home field advantage is going to matter in this one, so I'm taking the Saints. They're going to beat the Bears and go to the Super Bowl.
All right, so here we are now. We've got the Bears versus the Seahawks in the championship game to go to the Super Bowl. I'm going to give this advantage to the Seahawks. I don't trust Mitchell Trubisky to get a lot done in the passing game, and the rushing game is averaging just 3.9 yards per carry. I just don't trust that offense. Certainly that Bears defense is awesome, but how many games can just a defense win for you? At some point, you need to see that offense step up a little bit more than they have. I'm going to give advantage to the Seahawks for being the more well-rounded team, having a better, more experienced coaching staff and quarterback, and I think that they're going to come out and win this game and go to the Super Bowl. I don't think it'll be extremely close, or I think it'll be a fairly close match, but shouldn't be too close. I definitely feel confident the Seahawks will win this.
All right. So let's take a look at the Colts at the Ravens. So I'm predicting the Ravens over the Colts 24-21. They're playing at home in the cold. I think this magical run, I guess, runs out, you'd say, comes to an end in this one. So I'm taking the Ravens over the Colts 24-21. I'm not going to break it down because we've talked about all the things early on. Once again, I'm taking that Ravens defense making it back to the Super Bowl versus the Saints.
All right, here we have it, Chiefs versus Patriots. Who's going to make it to the Super Bowl? Spoiler alert, I'm going to call that the Chiefs make it to the Super Bowl. The Patriots are very good, but I just don't trust some of their weapons in that offense. The running game is pretty good. It's above average, but it's not great. It's not elite. Their wide receivers are depleted and banged up. Gronkowski isn't who he used to be. That offensive line is still good, but Tom Brady is not the quarterback that he was a couple of years ago. We have seen some struggles from him this year, watching game film, even times just missed throws. I don't think he's able to be honestly good enough to turn those wideouts into what they need to be. That defense is also pretty good, but not great. I don't think they're good enough to stop the Chiefs, especially. I think maybe slow them down a little bit, but the Chiefs are going to score 28 to 30 points, 35 points, maybe 40. Who knows? And I just don't think that Patriots offense can keep up. There's only so much scheming that Bill Belichick can do.
All right. So here's my Super Bowl prediction. I've got the Saints versus the Ravens. I got the Saints winning 34-24. All to make Lamar Jackson's inability to make big throws finally catches up to him. I'm taking the Saints to win their second Super Bowl there. That's who I've got.
All right. All right, in this game, I have the very close battle, but I have the Seattle Seahawks winning this game over the Chiefs. I think that high-flying offense is great, 50 touchdowns, awesome. Pat Mahomes is amazing, but you know what? I wonder how long can he stay hot for? How awesome can he be? And I don't trust that defense. They've allowed a lot of points to a lot of average teams this year, and I think that Seattle could put some good schemes together and kind of slow down that offense enough and take advantage of that poor defense.
All right. So there you see it. That's my playoff prediction. That's how I have it playing out there. The one thing I did notice, I really want defense in this one. I think it's going to matter. I think defense wins championships, and so I've got the defenses going pretty deep into the postseason, but ultimately I give it to the Saints as being the more balanced team in the end. But that's how I've got it tracked out. We would encourage you, if you're going to enter the contest, by the way, don't just go right to picking your fantasy players. Do something like this. Go through your projections, who you think is going to play and face who, and then you're going to kind of know, does the team have 3 games in the postseason, 1, 2, and that's going to help you pick your players. But that's my scenario.
All right, here's my scenario. Kind of similar to you, I really like defense in this one. However, for me, I lean more towards who has the better quarterback. Come playoff time, you have to have your quarterback play well on every single down in every single game. And so a lot of times I found myself saying, I just don't trust that quarterback, and that was something that guided a lot of my decisions. Of course, not all of them, but just a trend I noticed after running this through, this kind of making my scenario.
Okay, so based on how we have it going and the contest we talked about here, these are the lineups that we are going to submit, barring something happen. This is Tuesday night, so I mean, barring an injury between now and Saturday, this is who we're going to roll with. Our lineups based on the scenarios that we ran. If you're looking at entering the contest, we want to tell you once again, it's free, and the top 10 people are going to get free t-shirts, and the number 1 guy gets a free sweatshirt there. It's a great thing for you to do. The one thing that's important to know if you enter this contest is that once the playoffs start, there are no substitutions for injuries, or if your team loses, they are done. Now, it may seem wise to pick the number 1 seed, but if you happen to roll with a wild card, like in your case, Seattle, I mean, obviously they're going to get an extra game in there, so there's incentive to go with wild card teams there. It's so important. Here's what we want to talk about, just some details on how you enter the contest. So the one thing that we're asking you, if you enter the contest, you have to put the lineup on this video or the video we released Sunday night and put it like that, stacked on top of each other, names not side by side. It helps us to enter it. So once again, if I'm missing anything, by the way, feel free to interject that there. Your lineups must be submitted by Saturday before the first game starts. And here's the scoring system we're going to use is a full point PPR. If you have any other questions about the contest or whatnot, feel free to put in the video. We'll answer it for you.
In case you want to check it out, of course, you put a roster and you want to watch it, what you can do is go to fantasyfootballprofits.com. There's a link on our YouTube channel in case you're watching this somewhere else, but you can click on that, or you can just type it in and go to the website. It should look like what we have here on the screen, and then you'll just click Playoff Contest. And then from there, you'll see something pop up on the screen that says Playoff Contest, Rosters and Results, and you'll just click Check It Out, and then we'll have an Excel spreadsheet with every person who's put in a lineup, their lineup that they've put in and the points that they've scored, and that will help you guys keep track, of course, how you're doing. Hopefully you guys will be doing well.
Yeah. Last couple things to note pertaining to the contest. You have to be subscriber to win, and only 1 lineup per person. Once again, don't put lineups anywhere. They've got to be on the bottom of the video. That's going to help us track that. And the final thing, once again, it's a free contest. We are giving away free prizes first 10 teams, but if you're not in the continental United States, you will have to pay postage. Sorry, last year we got dinged on some stuff outside the United States. Those are some thoughts on the games we have, our predictions, our lineups. Once again, fantasy football is not over, and football is certainly not over. We appreciate all your support. Those subscribe, like, continue to do that. Let your friends know, and look for some changes in the offseason that we're going to make to our website, to our videos, and we want feedback from you guys. Anything you want feedback in terms of the videos that they should tell you as you kind of work on this, Christian?
No, yeah, we try to inserting these videos so you guys can watch some highlights while we talk. If you guys enjoy that, let us know. Leave a like, share the video, guys. Help support us. We love making these videos, but it is very, very straining, very, very exhausting. And so if you guys want us to keep doing this, you got to support the channel by subscribing, liking, dropping some comments. And hey, even if just let us know that you like what we're doing. And as I mentioned a second ago, I want to know how you feel about these videos that we've inserted in some of the highlights. Guys, as always, thank you so much for watching. You have a great day, and God bless.